welcome to another edition of Spoken Voices. We hope everybody's doing fine, as we always say during this pandemic. I hope everybody's taking care of themselves, hoping everybody is doing what they need to do to take care of family and friends, and of course, your fellow man. Wear a mask, do what you can, do everything that you can, like I always say. Today we have a special guest. And I'm very impressed by this young man, and I know you will be too by the end of this interview. And his name is Sir Michael Singleton. And let's start by asking Mr. Singleton, how are you doing today?
Man, I'm doing well. And I mean, I first want to say thank you for having me on your program. And I echo your sentiments about people being safe during the pandemic, especially with Thanksgiving approaching. Christmas is quickly behind. New Year's is immediately after that. And we know for a fact that African Americans and the Hispanic community, we are disproportionately impacted by the virus, with Hispanics and African Americans being the most disproportionately impacted. And so we want to make sure that our communities in particular are practicing safety distancing, that we're wearing masks, that we're washing our hands. And we just need to be cognizant, particularly around the holidays, with our elder family members, because we are very community-centered individuals. We love being around each other. We love being around family. But this may be a holiday season where we limit ourselves as it pertains to how much we're around each other, particularly our older family members. So I just want to echo that. Please be safe during this pandemic. The numbers are rising. It is not a joke. A lot of people have lost loved ones this year, and we don't want to see those numbers continue, particularly in our communities.
Of course, and me and Maribel echo that too, because I'm a diabetic, and so it's a concern and I have a 90-year-old mother, 91 at the end of the month. So yeah, we all have to take the responsibility to be thoughtful about other people. This disclaimer, I've watched Sir Michael for a few years. And I've always, since the first time I saw this guy, hey. I was always very impressed by his demeanor, how he carried himself, and how he was like the voice of reason when everybody else seemed to be losing their minds. But what made me reach out to Sir Michael was a video that he did about Black fathers and how we're basically known not to be in the household. And Sir Michael, I want you to tell everybody what inspired you to do that video.
Well, you know, it's interesting because I happen to have a friend who is a well-known African-American conservative. And this particular person tweeted some things about Black fatherhood and how there's this absence of Black fathers, which in turn is why, quote unquote, many Black communities face a plethora of various challenges. And I didn't like the demeanor. And I said, you know, I wonder if this is actually true. And being a policy guy, before I started doing media, I'm used to doing a lot of research. I'm used to reading through a lot of complicated stuff. And so I began doing research, and I found a couple of articles in the Chicago Defender, Huffington Post, Newsweek, pertaining to the stat by the CDC that actually stated that it's not true at all. So I then reached out to someone actually at the CDC to ask them about this particular study. The person, the lead author of the study, wasn't available to talk with me, but they did say, hey, we'll send you the study, which is actually public, but we'll also send you some additional information that we weren't able to include in the study. And so I read over the entire study, and I read over all the additional information. It was pretty hefty stuff, but well worth the time. And it was very clear that phrase that there is absent Black fatherhood it's a misnomer. It's a falsehood. It's just not true at all. And if I could, get into the data, according to the CDC, yes, there is indeed 1.7 million African-American men who do not reside in the home with their children. However, there's over 2 million, I believe about 2.5 million to be exact, who actually do reside in the home of their children. And of the 1.7 million who don't reside in the home, more than half of that 1.7 million actually are involved and engaged in their children's lives via shared joint custody agreements with the mother, of course, or they spend time with the kids at various points during the week, or sometimes they may have the kids during the weekends. And that data point, which is very, very critical, isn't typically acknowledged in the overall data that you see that say, well, Black dads just aren't there, because what they look at is primarily what percent actually live in the home. And so while we're overrepresented in the percent that do not live in the home by virtue of our population size when compared to white Americans, it is very, very critical that one, it's stated that the majority of us do reside in the home. It's two, very critical to state that of the 1.7 million who do not reside in the home, the majority of that 1.7 million is actually involved and engaged in their kids' lives. And so the percent that's not engaged at all, yes, data does indeed indicate that that leads to trouble, particularly for young boys who ultimately grow up into men. But that's a very, very small percent of the overall experience that Black children have with their dads who live in the home, and Black children who have experiences with their dad who don't live in the home, but who are very, very engaged in their kids' lives. And that same study said that Black fathers are the most involved in their children's lives, not just the ones who reside in the home, but even those who don't reside in the home. So we're doing after school activities. We're spending time with our kids more so than any other demo group. This isn't my opinion. This is according to the Center for Disease Control, which I think we would all agree is a reputable source for tracking information as it pertains to our health. And so the reason they did this study is because they really wanted to better understand, well, what dynamic does a father play in the overall health and maturation of the health of a kid's life into adulthood? And so they began to start to figure out, well, how does it break down by ethnicity, white Americans, Asian Americans, Hispanic and African Americans? And then they started getting into the data, a more nuanced data that is of, well, what percent of dads actually live in the home, what percent don't live in the home, of the percent that don't live in the home, how many are engaged, and why all of those various data points are critical in the overall conversation about fatherhood and who's engaged and the role they play in their kids' lives. And so I just felt it was sort of time to dispel that misnomer with actual facts, with data that actually exists that says that's just not the truth at all. That's not the case. Now, does that not mean we should not be concerned with the percent of Black fathers who are just not engaged at all? We absolutely should be concerned about that because, again, we overrepresent. That percent overrepresents when compared to other groups by virtue of our population size. And so that is of concern to me. We should try to decrease that number as much as we possibly can. But when you think about the majority of Black men, they're there, they're present. And I just felt it was really, really time for someone to say that, but say it with some statistical data to back that point.
Right. And I'm 59.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like for most of my adult life, that was the thing that was going around,
mm-hmm.
the theory that, and I grew up with my dad,
mm-hmm.
And my brother is a good dad and my uncles.
Mm-hmm.
So I was thinking maybe, after a while you start thinking maybe we're an anomaly,
right.
maybe,
right.
But wait a minute. I have to run around with my kids, even after I was divorced from their mother.
Mm-hmm.
I was basically zipping and zapping from Richmond, Virginia, back to New Haven
mm-hmm.
every other week. So I said, and me not being crazy, I said, I'm not the only person doing this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not the only person that's putting the time into my children's life. Where do you think, or why do you think that theory came up and it sticks, even to this day?
Yeah, so I tried to research that because that was very, very important for me to try to better understand how we arrived to this point. And there's a couple different ideas about where it started, but it seems to, at least from what I've been able to find, all points to politics being the original source of this myth of the absent Black father, that is. And it looks about the late 60s, early 70s, where you sort of began to see some ruminations of this idea of, the reason Black people are having so many issues in their community is because Black fathers aren't there, Black men aren't present. And then it just sort of took off from there. And over the years and over the decades and years, it's morphed into all sorts of different things. which again, just aren't based off of hardcore data at all. It just sort of became sort of like a political talking point, if you will. And I hate to sort of use that word, but that's essentially what it became for some individuals to utilize it to have a sort of broad brush effect, if you will, over Black men, to say your problems are directly tied, Black people, to the lack of Black men being fathers. If you just merely focus on building up your families, all will be well. And the reality is most of us actually do have very thriving family units. Again, I don't disregard the percent who aren't there. That is critical. But you can't focus on that small percent when compared to the overall majority. And that's where I have a problem with the conversation and that myth telling that Black men just aren't there. But yeah, so in my research, it appears to be political, late 60s, early 70s, from a couple of different articles I was able to find of individuals who were saying that they weren't sure, but from old articles that they were able to look up, they sort of started to begin to see that narrative painted, or quotes saying Black fathers aren't there around that time period.
Right. So what do you think we can do? I know what you're doing. You're making the effort. What can we do as a community to kind of break that chain of misinformation?
No, right. No, I think we just need to be very, very direct about who we are as a community of people. And we're very vocal, for an example, on criminal justice reform, right? In police brutality, vis-a-vis the Black Lives Matter movement. As of late, we've been very, very vocal about the role Black women play in our body politic for at least the past decade, the last 10 years, through various women organizations. We've been very vocal on Black women in health, for an example, through various organizations. And so it's clear that when we focus on something, we know how to galvanize within our own community and externally by pulling in allies to give us a microphone, if you will, to reach other individuals about whatever our respective message as a community is. And I think we need to follow those similar models as it pertains to Black men, to say we're more than just criminal justice reform. We're more than police brutality. Yes, this does indeed impact us. And yes, indeed, it does impact certain men within our community. But we want to focus on the more positive elements of our community, such as Black men being present, being caregivers, providers for their families, and most importantly, being fathers and being great dads. And we can do that. I think the onus is going to be on us. I have always had the mindset that I am not going to expect someone else to tell my story and tell it well, because more than likely, if they tell it, it's going to be in a way that I don't like. There's going to have a lot of mistruths there. And so when you dictate your own narrative, when you tell your own history, you are the beginning and you are the end. And we are beginning to see that again in the examples that I just pointed out. And I think we need to do the same thing as it pertains to Black men and Black fathers.
Yeah, and that what you said about criminal justice reform, after a while, because that narrative has been going on for the last really strong.
Don't get me started on that.
Hey, Michael, check this out, right? Because about 3 years into our president's term, we kept hearing this thing. And I don't know why. As soon as I kept hearing it week after week after week, I started thinking to myself, and I said that and I'm a retired correction officer. So my thing is, it's still not the biggest concern for me. It is a concern.
Sure.
Nevertheless, there are so many other things that are going on in our communities, right? Where I don't want to see that front and center. I had wrote something and I was talking to someone and I said, you have to understand, first and foremost, right? We're not all criminals. We don't have,
right. Like I've never been arrested before.
Locked up that we know. Right. There are some of us who have no one. We know no one that's locked up. So basically it's not the first and foremost thing on our minds when we think about our daily lives. There's so many other things, and most of the things that you just said, I want to see more younger people be able to get up and speak as you do. You know, I don't care what your affiliation politically is, because it doesn't matter.
Right. Yeah.
It's if you're talking positivity to everyone,
Mhm.
it shouldn't matter. And I think one of the problems with our community is that we look at, even if you're telling me something, but I don't agree with who you politically are affiliated with,
Mhm.
I don't hear the good stuff that you say.
Right. Right.
You know, and
Yeah.
that, and again, I go back to when I first started seeing you,
Mhm.
I started going, well, it doesn't matter who he's with, you know, what team
Right.
he's on. I just happen to
Where are
like
my
what he's
priorities,
saying.
right? Right, right.
Yeah.
Where are my priorities based on what I'm saying? And I've had the belief that African Americans, as minorities, disenfranchised individuals, we are the second oldest minority group in this country, behind the natives, of course, who are the originals.
Mhm.
And we, from my perspective, should not be of the mindset that one political party can have a monopolization over our vote and over our interest. And people will say, well, oftentimes Republicans are racist, or they have a history of this or that as of late. And I acknowledge that those things are true. Like, we have some serious issues as it pertains to engaging Black people in a way of respect. And we used to do that, right? And many African Americans, if you look at a lot of data points, they just view the Republican Party as being very negative and against racial justice progress. Hence the reason the majority of us have said, we're wiping our hands clean of the party we originally used to vote for overwhelmingly, for the Democratic Party, for the last 50, 60 years. I
Mhm.
get that. But I always remind people, do you think the civil rights leaders of the 1930s, 40s, 50s, and 60s were dealing with white people who were jovial and happy to work with them? Absolutely not. They were dealing with white people who hated them, who hated their existence, but
Right.
white people who understand, nevertheless, for strategic reasons, whatever their strategic end goals were, that
Mhm.
they needed to work with African Americans. And the African Americans at the time realized the same thing. And I think we need to approach the body politic, generally speaking, with that same mindset of, I'm not necessarily looking for a best friend in this thing. I am just looking for an individual or individuals that will bring to fruition the interest of my community, the interest of my people. And whichever party is going to not only communicate that the best, but actually bring it to light through the policy process, that's the party that's going to get my vote. But in order to, I guess, maintain that expectation, you really have to have both parties competing for the vote. Because when one party essentially has a monopolization, at some point, this is almost like in business, if you will, at some point they're going to say, well, why do we have to continue to be come up with ingenuity, if you will, right? Why do we have to have ingenuous ideas rather, to target this group? Because we know they're going to vote for us anyway. It's like a business that creates something, right? Why
Right.
do we have to modernize this new thing when they're going to keep buying a new thing, or keep buying that thing until a new entity comes along, and that new entity says, you know what? I have this new thing that's better than the old. Then that old company says, wait a minute here, we got to get a little better with some of the things that we've been creating. It's not working. We're going to end up out of business. And so
Right.
I have that same mindset in politics. If you want a political party to continue to meet your standards and expectations, you have to make sure that there is viable competition vis-a-vis the other political party. And so if
Right.
Democrats understand that 25% of African Americans are going to vote Republican, it's not just going to be enough to say, we're going to focus on criminal justice, or we're going to increase minimum wage, which, yeah, sure, that's great.
Right.
But how about, passing some legislation where more of us can be entrepreneurs, so that we're not reliant upon minimum wage at all, or
Right.
focusing on better opportunities as it pertains to college or trade, so that minimum wage is something that we may do in high school to get by, or even college to get through college, so that we have a job for extra income, but it's not our livelihood.
Right.
Right. And the only way, from my perspective, to get to that point is to have political ingenuity. And political ingenuity arises out of political parties competing against one another with the best ideas for our vote. That is currently not the realization for African Americans. And so I don't think, to your point, political parties should matter at all, as long as the primary focus is on the progression and success of African American people, generally speaking. Political parties don't matter if a person is Democrat or Republican, as long as that is centered as they move through the ranks of either side. Then I think we should support and encourage those individuals, because at the end of the day, our only concern, which is the concern of every other group in this country, is about the end result. And the end result, the best result, again, will only come by two competing parties who are competing for our votes, which again, I believe leads to political ingenuity.
That is so true. And that's why on our show, and my wife, she said that she never wanted it to be about, if I'm coming up here and I'm spewing all this stuff about the Democrat, oh, I'm a Democrat, oh, I'm a Republican. She said that is something she didn't want our show to be. Nothing like that. Because first of all, it's divisive. It's like they tell you when you get your job. They used to tell us when I was younger, don't talk about religion or politics on the job because it causes problems.
Right.
And so we always want the show to be positive. And I think the things that you were saying is so positive that anybody with any, common sense would look at and go, well, wait a minute, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. And it has nothing to do with an affiliation to a political party.
Yeah. It's not about that. And if I can really, really quickly, I want to bring up something. So you were talking about Black men in crime. And this is something that just came into my head when I was doing my research. We know for a fact that the crime rates in inner cities have decreased steadily, except for now. They've sort of gone back up because of COVID. And that's because when people aren't working, I think this. When people aren't working, when they're not productive, crime goes up. Like that's known. That's a very, very known data point. But with that said, with the exception of the past 8 months, for the last several years now, crime have gone down significantly. And in fact, the incarceration rates for Black men, I believe, decreased around 35%, according to the Brookings Institute. I could be wrong a point or two. I can't remember the exact number, but I believe around 35%. And the incarceration rate for white Americans is actually going up. So you're seeing a reversal, if you will, in incarceration rates. And, I'm not trying to minimize anybody being arrested here. But, if the shoe fits, you got to put it on.
You got to put it on.
I just got to throw that out there.
Yeah. And like I said, though, it is so important. And I know you're doing more than that video because I've seen a few more of your videos. Are you finding that you're getting a lot more younger people to kind of like, I don't want to say follow along, but kind of listen to what you're saying? Yeah,
so it's so interesting. So this new content that I'm creating content in a partnership that I'm currently doing with Facebook right now, which is why I'm still doing my regular media stuff here and there, but this is primarily my main focus is to sort of build out this new this new avenue, if you will, for myself. So I'm focusing on African-American centered issues, but from a data-driven point and it's certainly a more positive point. And again, I'm certainly going to touch on things that realizes some of the shortcomings of our community because, we have to be realistic with ourselves in order to improve. But you can talk about those things without dehumanizing people. You can talk about those things without talking down to people where they view you as somehow a superior to themselves. Therefore, they just immediately shut you out because they feel that there's no connection there. And so that's what I'm trying to find. But yeah, to answer your question, I have found a lot of young people who've reached out and said, man, I really like this, or I didn't know this data point, or I didn't know that this existed at all. And it's now led to me getting ready to partner with a new organization. I think we're going to probably try to roll this out the end of this year or early next year. That is a political organization that's nonpartisan, that's going to focus on African-American political power and influence in key swing states. And the objective is to say, we're politically neutral. We're taking no stances left or right. We're going to be objective. But what we are going to do is speak directly to African-Americans in key swing states where we really can decide an election, as we've recently seen, right? Yeah. And we're going to talk about the various issues that impact Black people in this country. And what the end goal is to educate Black people enough so that they begin to demand from both political parties that they meet those concerns. And so again, that goes to my original point of creating political ingenuity, of saying you guys have to compete for our vote with the best ideas. And just like in business, the person with the best ideas, that's the business that's going to make the most money. The political candidate, the political party with the best ideas is the individual that will receive the most votes from African Americans. So this came out of actually that video. This group reached out to me and they have some pretty affluent funders, if you will, that saw the video and they're just like, hey, you know, we're familiar with him, but maybe we can figure out something here. And they said, well, hey, would you be interested in leading a political action committee that focuses on African Americans, that focuses on some of the issues that you've talked about in a way that galvanizes Black people so that they're not just voting primarily one way, but in a way that says, wait a minute here, let's look at the political landscape as a neutral party. Let's throw out our ideas and say, okay, Republicans, okay, Democrats, let's see what you got. Let's see what you're bringing to the table. And whoever, you know, brings those best ideas, as I said, you're going to get our vote. And the party who doesn't bring forth the best ideas, you won't get our vote. And so that means, Democrats, you are going to have to now compete with Republicans. And it's not enough to say that the Republicans are, oh, they're just racist, they're just this or just that. No. You have to bring real meat to the table, right? Like, we don't want the crumbs of a little bit here, or, oh, we've done this, or, oh, they're that. No, both parties are going to get an opportunity to present their best ideas forward. And then we will determine which ideas are in our best interest. And so that came out of actually that video. So that's a new thing that I'm going to be working on. And I'm excited about it, man, because I think Black people now, especially my generation of millennials, I don't think we're necessarily tied on this idea that we have to vote one way. I think people are saying, hey, I'm interested in potentially something else, but that something else, it must make sense. That something else has to be in our interest in the long run. And that's where my primary focus currently is.
And I think it's good, again, because of your age. And I think you appeal to younger people. They'll see a young Black man who's out there doing something. And because sometimes I feel like when a young person hears me, right, they're going like, well, you're 59 years old. You don't know what I'm going through.
Right.
And I'll tell them, you don't know music because you don't like jazz. You don't know who Miles Davis is. But anyway.
I like jazz and Miles, by the way. I just got to throw that out there. But I also like music that people my age like too. So
well, our sons are basically rappers and stuff. So I have to listen to them. But I do like it. I'm not going to lie. You know, they actually had me get on one of their tracks.
I mean, look, man, the hip hop, rap music, you know, jazz. I play the piano. You know, you would see that there's a lot of roots steeped in jazz, steeped in the blues that you will now see in rap music if you study the transformation of music theory. So I know most people who listen to rap, they probably could care less about that, but I just want to throw out that there is direct history from rap and sort of this poetic eloquence, if you will, and storytelling, if you will, and even the beat and rhythm patterns, which people don't believe, that is traced to jazz and blues, which is American music, even country, which people think country is originally a white. That's not true. Originally, it's a Black genre of music that we created. And I can go on and on about this stuff. But just for your audience sake, you know, rap music, jazz, blues, hip hop, even country, it stems from all of those things. And again, if you study music theory and rhythms and beats and again, phrasings of various phrases and how rappers rap today, you can see the direct lineage right there. And we should applaud that. And we should be amazed by just how creative of a people we are.
Right. What I applaud is what you're doing. And
I appreciate that.
Wish we had a longer time to go. But
next time, man, I'll gladly come back.
You better come back.
You have my word. I'm saying this now. You have my word.
You need to keep in contact with me with the things that you're doing, because I think it's really important. And I think any way that I could help, let me know.
Yeah, we do have the platform.
Yeah, you can email me, call me, whatever you need, and I will definitely
and we're here to support you.
Yeah,
absolutely. I appreciate that. And hey, thank you guys so much for giving me the opportunity to be on your show. And it's just so crazy how many people found resonance in that video. I was just on MSNBC, I think a week ago, talking about the video. I just did a couple of interviews with some folks, media friends in the press about it. And I was happy to join you guys on your show as well to talk about it. And I got a feeling in the next couple of months, there'll be some other interesting things that I'm going to be working on that you guys might find palatable and in sync with your audience. And I'd love to come back and talk about those things.
You got to let us know what you're doing, and we will definitely have you back on, man. We appreciate the time.
Will do. Thanks so much, guys. I appreciate it.
Not a problem.
Take care.
All
Take
right.
care.
Be good. As I always say, man makes plans, God smiles. Please come back and join us again on Spoken Voices. And again, we hope you enjoyed the show. We hope that he informed you about a lot of things. If you didn't know, now you know. All right. Take care.